Jessica Tarlov has always known what it feels like to be the outlier in the room. For years, she sat in the middle of a Fox News set, surrounded by voices that often didn't just disagree with her. They attacked, mocked, and sometimes even dismissed her entirely. But she never raised her voice or stormed off. Instead, she sat taller, spoke clearer, and refused to break, becoming a quiet symbol for what it means to stand your ground in the lion's den. But what viewers never saw was how close Jessica came more than once to leaving it all behind. It started years ago when Jessica first joined the Five and outnumbered. At first, she was the fresh new voice, the young progressive with a sharp tongue and an even sharper command of facts. Producers loved her ability to hold her own with seasoned conservative pundits. But what they didn't realize was that the relentless barrage of interruptions, sneers, and audience jeers was slowly chipping away at her resolve. Every day, Jessica would go home, peel off the studio makeup, and sit in the silence of her apartment, replaying the moments she wished she'd spoken up more, or maybe not spoken at all. The tipping point came one afternoon during a segment that was supposed to be light, a chat about gas prices, the president's poll numbers, and the usual back and forth. But the conversation took a turn. One co-host rolled his eyes so dramatically, the entire panel laughed. The camera caught it. The memes started immediately. Jessica smiled through it. But inside something cracked. For the first time she wondered, is it worth it? Is being the liberal punching bag really worth the hate, mail, the threats, the constant second-guessing of every word? Behind the scenes, she called her husband that night, her voice shaking. She'd never told anyone how deeply it got to her, how even her own family sometimes asked, "Why do you stay?" She thought about the other networks that had offered her contracts, places where she'd be surrounded by people who agreed with her, who would nod instead of sneer. It would be so easy to walk away, so easy to be loved instead of loathed. But as the weeks went by, Jessica realized something that changed everything. She wasn't there for the approval of her co-hosts. She was there for the people watching, the ones who wrote her quiet private messages saying, "You make me feel like I'm not alone," or "I wouldn't watch this network if it weren't for you." She thought about the young women who'd see her hold her ground unflinching while men twice her age tried to rattle her. She thought about her daughter who would one day ask, "Mum, what did you stand for?" And she knew she had to stay. In a rare closed-door meeting, Jessica finally told her producers the truth, that she was 1 foot out the door, that she was tired of the cheap shots, the dismissive gestures, the thinly veiled contempt, and to her surprise, something changed. Slowly, subtly, a few more seconds to speak, fewer interruptions. Co-hosts, who might still disagree, but now showed her the respect she'd earned. She learned to navigate the chessboard, to choose when to fight and when to sit back and let her points land like quiet thunder. Today, Jessica Tarlov is still there, a constant calm storm in the middle of a panel that sometimes feels like a hurricane of bad faith arguments. She doesn't expect to win every debate. She doesn't need to, because the truth is she almost quit. She almost gave in, but she didn't. And for millions who watch her, that decision means more than any argument she's ever won on air. Jessica always knew she'd be the odd one out. From her earliest days as a political analyst, she understood exactly what it meant to sit in a chair surrounded by people who not only disagreed with her, but sometimes made her the villain of the segment. It wasn't just about having a different opinion. It was about defending it word by word in front of millions of viewers who either rooted for her to stand her ground or silently cheered every time she got cut off. She remembers the first time she walked into the Fox News studio, bright lights hitting her face, a panel full of seasoned conservative commentators shifting in their seats as she took hers. Her heart pounded so loudly she wondered if the lav mic would pick it up. It wasn't the debates that scared her. It was the quiet moments in between, the quick side eyes when she made a good point, the forced laughs when she called out a flawed argument, the awkward tension when she dared to say what half the audience didn't want to hear. In those early years, Jessica would drive home from the studio, her mind replaying every exchange, every snarky comment, every moment she felt like she could have said more or said less. Some nights she'd stand in the shower washing off the makeup and trying to scrub away the invisible bruises from another brutal day of verbal sparring. Her parents worried. Her friends asked why she didn't just join another network someplace, where she'd be cheered for her progressive takes instead of mocked. But Jessica, stubborn as ever, believed that change only happened when you planted your feet where it was hardest to grow. But there were moments that tested her resolve more than she ever let on. There was the day a co-host rolled his eyes so obviously that the clip went viral. Memes popped up everywhere. Strangers from both sides of the aisle flooded her inbox. Some praised her for keeping her composure, but the hate was louder. One message simply said, "Why do you let them do this to you? Get out." And for the first time, Jessica really thought about it. What if she did leave? What if she stopped being the lone voice of dissent, the liberal punching bag, the calm center of the storm when everyone around her was yelling? She'd had offers, big ones, private calls from other networks, producers who promised bigger paychecks, more sympathetic panels, softer landings, but every time she pictured herself somewhere else, she saw the empty chair she'd leave behind, and the young woman watching from home, wondering why no one like her was on screen anymore. That's what pulled her back over and over again. Still, it wasn't just the on-air moments that wore her down. It was what happened after the cameras stopped rolling. The smirks, the side comments, the way some colleagues would brush past her in the hallway as if she'd committed a crime by standing her ground. There were days she'd call her husband, her voice cracking, whispering, "I don't know if I can do this anymore." He'd listen patiently, remind her why she started, and promised her that what she was doing mattered. But only Jessica knew how heavy that truth really felt. It all came to a head one afternoon. The segment was supposed to be a breezy debate about a new tax policy, but it turned into a shouting match that left Jessica sitting silent, her points buried under sarcastic jokes and pointed interruptions. When the cameras cut, she sat there for a long moment staring at the floor. That night, she didn't sleep. She lay awake, watching the city lights flicker outside her window, wondering if this was the moment she'd finally had enough. The next morning, she walked into a private meeting with her producers. She didn't sugarcoat it. She told them she was done being talked over, done being the prop that made the show look balanced. While they stacked the deck against her, she laid out her boundaries: more time to speak, more respect on air, no more cheap shots. If they couldn't deliver, she'd walk for good. To her surprise, they listened. Not perfectly, not overnight, but they listened. Co-hosts who once rolled their eyes now paused to let her finish. Producers who once shrugged off her complaints now made sure her voice wasn't just heard, but amplified. And slowly, the hate mail was drowned out by the messages that really mattered. "Thank you for staying. You're the reason I watch. You make me feel like I'm not crazy." Today, Jessica Tarlov still walks into that studio every week, fully aware that she's the outlier, the lightning rod for every insult that flies when facts feel uncomfortable. She knows some people hate her just for sitting there calmly reading the truth from a stack of notes while everyone else tries to shout her down. But now, when she goes home at night, she sleeps a little easier because she knows she almost gave up, and she knows why she didn't. When her daughter grows up, Jessica wants her to understand what that choice meant. That sometimes the bravest thing you can do is stand exactly where you're not wanted and refuse to leave. Because that's how change happens, one uncomfortable conversation at a time. And no matter how loud the noise gets, the quiet power of staying put will always matter more. Jessica Tarlov has always known what it feels like to be the outlier in the room. For years, she sat in the middle of a Fox News set, surrounded by voices that often didn't just disagree with her. They attacked, mocked, and sometimes even dismissed her entirely. But she never raised her voice, or stormed off. Instead, she sat taller, spoke clearer, and refused to break, becoming a quiet symbol for what it means to stand your ground in the lion's den. But what viewers never saw was how close Jessica came more than once to leaving it all behind. It started years ago when Jessica first joined the Five and Outnumbered. At first, she was the fresh new voice, the young progressive with a sharp tongue and an even sharper command of facts. Producers loved her ability to hold her own with seasoned conservative pundits. But what they didn't realize was that the relentless barrage of interruptions, sneers were slowly chipping away at her resolve. Every day, Jessica would go home, peel off the studio makeup, and sit in the silence of her apartment, replaying the moments she wished she'd spoken up more, or maybe not spoken at all. The tipping point, see.